Okay. Okay, so Washington. He's the one we chose to celebrate the 250th, and why him? Um, just to review a little bit, Ken Burns declared that the American Revolution was the most consequential in history, and Chat defends that assertion to a certain extent. And the main thing was the establishment of popular sovereignty power from the consent of the government, which from the governed, which we take almost as a cliche. But the main thing is the revolution has survived. Um, that it's turned out to be quite durable. And um, as opposed to other revolutions, many of which turned violent. And Ken Burns says one person and one person alone is responsible, Washington. So that's kind of a exaggeration, but uh, we're finding out that he is playing a vital role, and we're going to see even more as we do the end of the war. That is particularly true. Um, so Tom was just commenting he enjoyed this series. So if you haven't seen it, he and I would recommend it. Um, Available on Prime. And then this book by Ron Chernow, who we're all familiar with from, he did the biography Hamilton, which the musical was based on. And it's 260 pages, but you can get it down for the war years between Lexington and Yorktown to 280. And it's the best biography, and it's guided me a lot in what I'm saying. So we talked about what was unique about Washington was his cat and mouse type of military strategy built on an early Roman general and therefore called the Fabian um, uh, strategy, where it's basically the guerrilla warfare strategy. And so his nickname was the Delayer, Fabian, Fabius, and attacking supply lines, not risking your own troops, and the guerrilla warfare. And so I'd asked, well, what were the other practitioners? And um, uh, one was the Russian general who thwarted Napoleon by burning Moscow to the ground. Mao Zedong, another one, the Vietnamese general Giap, who held off France and then us, practicing selective escalation whenever it had comparative advantage. And then more than Washington was Nathaniel Greene. You'll remember last week he had lost Fort Washington, and his reputation had been damaged. But later, in the second half of the war, he went down south and used Fabian strategy even more than Washington. He had perfected it, and he exhausted Cornwallis and set him up for Yorktown. So there was this round table I asked ChatGPT to organize, and um, here are some excerpts. Uh, Mao says, occupation is expensive. If you can make your enemy occupy land, time is on your side because he's got to maintain his supply lines. And as I said, Nathaniel Greene did that. He said he divided his forces repeatedly, accepted tactical defeats to stretch out the British supply lines. And that retreat is merely attack and reverse. And Washington made the comment that if you can frustrate the enemy, that counts as a plus. And General Giap makes the point that uh, you have the home court advantage. You're fighting on your home turf. And we see that repeatedly in the Revolutionary War. The patriots can live off the land, and the Brits can too, but it's much harder for them to do that, obviously. And Nathaniel Greene said with Cornwallis, it seemed like every victory he won seemed to weaken him. And Giap said, yeah, and that's because every mile the enemy advance, he has to uh, lengthen his supply line. So the most important factor in guerrilla warfare, Mao said political legitimacy. If you can build that up with the peasants, you can be a fish that swims in that water. Uh, Endurance, another factor, the spirit. But Greene said mobility, the ability to move quickly, strike, withdraw. And Washington had said discipline was his touchstone. Um, so uh, Greene makes the point it's not just the war, but it's the citizens remembering how the peace was governed by the victor. Um, and that was challenged after our Revolutionary War. Um, so time is a weapon, patience is a weapon, and Washington says it really comes down to human will. So, who else used the Fabian strategy just to make it, put a fine point on it? Muhammad Ali with his rope-a-dope. That was Fabian to its core. The rumble in the jungle, he just leaned against the rope and ducked. And by the 11th round, George Foreman was exhausted, and Ali came out of his shell, and that was it. That was it. For those of you who are familiar with this fight, there was a literary a guy, George Plimpton, who went over to Kinshasa along with Norman Mailer to witness this epic fight. So I thought it would be useful for you to just I know we're not going to go in depth to this map. There are, in fact, some errors. But what's clear, we remember it started in Boston, where Washington chased the British ships out of the Boston harbor by placing guns high on a hill. And then he went down to New York and made a number of errors and almost lost everything. But as we talked about last week, he barely escaped over to New Jersey and the Delaware. And there he made up for all his losses. He'd been retreating all the way down, but then he recrossed back over up north on the Delaware and had great victories at Trenton and Princeton. Uh, and he was back on track, but he uh, decided to not be that aggressive. And he was constantly in retreat. This is another map, and I only put it up to show how many places Washington spent more than a couple of months. So he was constantly on the move, and George Washington slept here is kind of a joke, but it was actually earned because he did wind up sleeping in a lot of places. And so this is what we've already covered: New York, Boston, and New York. Uh, and then he came back up and had great victories in Trenton and Princeton. But then he went slow and was more Fabian in the strategy. And the winters were particularly harsh, particularly Valley Forge. But he used Valley Forge to train his forces and give them more discipline. So he used it wisely. And then there was a lot of the British captured Philadelphia and they retreated from Philadelphia. And in those periods, Washington went up to the Hudson River. And he was very concerned that if the British controlled the river, they would be able to move with impunity from Canada in the north all the way to New York City in the south. So he had a very strong feeling that he needed to control the Hudson. And one of the main places was West Point. There was no real institution there. Of course, there would be after the war, but it was a strategic bend in the river where he thought he could put up and stop the British from controlling the Hudson. So here's the Hudson, and he you could split the colonies uh, from New England basically to the east, and the rest of the colonies to the west. And he knew that that was the key to America, and so the Hudson became very important. And because the folks to the east of the Hudson, Boston in particularly, had had started the war, had started the revolution, and most of the Continental Army came from there. If the British were able to control the Hudson, it would be like the head being cut off from the body. So obviously he was not from New England, but he recognized the importance of preserving New England morale. So the what he did was very ingenious. He had a 50-ton great chain made, and here's a link of it, which Iko and I saw when we visited West Point. And he could hang these heavy chains over sharpened log rafts. And whoever was in charge of maintaining this had a great deal of responsibility. And a war hero named Benedict Arnold had requested the appointment at West Point. And he was planning on doing a great deal of damage by sabotaging the chain before he was found out. Um, and the Benedict Arnold won that appointment to West Point because he was, up until then, a war hero. Um, and he and Horatio Gates won a huge victory at Saratoga. So where's Saratoga? Well, if you just use West Point as the reference point and go up the Hudson, Saratoga's right up here. So it was a very, the victory at Saratoga was quite important, not only for the control of the Hudson, but to impress the French. The French thought, well, gosh, if these patriots could defeat the British at Saratoga, let's take another look at supporting them as allies. And of course, the French come in, and they're going to be a big, important part of the story as the war winds down. Now, Washington was very big on regaining New York City. Maybe it was because he had such a dangerous defeat in New York City at Brooklyn Heights, and that he wanted to make up for that. But it started with him really wanting to target New York, but then over time he showed his flexibility and evolved into saying, "Hey, let's do a fake on the British. Let's feint to New York, and then go down south for the final Fabian attack, catching the British, and particularly Cornwallis, in making a mistake." So, you just have to, if you're a Fabian, just avoid mistakes and wait for your enemy to make a big mistake. And the British certainly did that. And it was, as I said before, Nathaniel Greene seeking redemption in the Southern theater. And he exhausted Cornwallis, and he forced them into retreat a number of times. I think the biggest one was to Charleston. But being a Fabian is like being a baseball manager. You just got to avoid that one big loss that will eliminate you and end your season. You just got to get to the playoffs. And that's why Washington had the flexibility of mind to do that, despite a very ordinary record as a conventional general. He was not a great military strategist because he didn't have the supplies. And the Yorktown victory had to be otherwise, time was not on America's side. It wasn't on Britain's side either. But by 1781, the war had been dragging on for 6 years. Americans were very weary of war. They were bankrupt. Every attempt that they made to correct the finances led to more inflation, and that was bringing everybody down. The soldiers were not getting paid. They weren't even given very good clothes to wear, nor enough food. So Washington in 1981, just before Yorktown, was warning Congress that our army might simply dissolve, and uh, the manpower required enlistments, and an enlistment was a contract, and usually for a year. And many enlistments were due to expire the winter of 1781. So if that weren't bad enough, the Patriot troops were starting to mutiny in response to all that. In Pennsylvania, there was a mutiny of over 1,000 men, and Washington resorted to firing squads. Washington, if you follow his history like Tom did and watch that documentary, you see throughout his career, he was a tough disciplinarian. So he had soldiers whipped. Like in this case, he had leaders of mutinies face firing squads. So, and this was, he wasn't particularly mean. This was par for the course. As we were following Junipero Serra, he was traveling north to California with soldiers. It was a partnership between the clergy and soldiers. And he actually asked military officers to punish their men, usually for accosting Native American women. That was the most common crime. He actually recommended lashes as part of military discipline. So that was not just Washington. That it certainly was universally practiced. If you've read any books or seen any movies about British naval discipline, getting flogged was a common thing. So Washington was a tough disciplinarian. And so the British
Hey, John, this is Tom. I want to add one word about the mutinies there and discipline. In the Doris Kearns documentary, it was sort of interesting when the firing squads would assemble to execute the leaders of the mutiny. I don't know if you recall, but uh, whoever the leaders of the mutiny was, the lieutenant generals, the colonels, the direct reports to General George Washington, did not do the executions. At least in the Doris Kearns documentary, the mutineers had to execute the leaders of the mutiny. And
yes,
if the mutineers didn't execute the leader of the mutiny, they were going to get shot by General Washington's lieutenant generals and colonels and majors and stuff like that. So that was pretty interesting what he did there.
Yeah, thanks for making that point. The making the men who may have been tempted by mutineer leaders, making them inflict the punishment had some psychological impact. That's for sure. Uh, Okay. So I'm going to say one thing. Um, the statement is made that Washington's military accomplishments were more strategic rather than tactical. What does that mean? It means that Washington could lose a lot of battles, but he was on track to win the war. And why was that? Um, uh, he knew he had an ace that he men followed him. He had charisma, and just following along the history of Washington through his lifetime, he invoked charisma that bordered on idolatry. And you just saw this over and over again. You saw it actually in the First Continental Congress when he turns up in a military uniform that he wore with the Virginia militia, the only attendee to show up in a military uniform. And he had the loyalty of many men from that time, just standing in a uniform and standing tall. He was tall for those times, I think 6'2", 6'3". And so uh, uh, and so that's what he could keep the troops together at Valley Forge in the worst conditions. And he would suffer together with his troops. Obviously, he had more amenities, but he was there. He wasn't in a townhouse in Philadelphia. He was there at Valley Forge and suffered with his men. And he lended actually some medical know-how to suffering in those conditions. He went against smallpox, not the smallpox vaccine, but by actually variolization, where you intentionally put uh, smallpox just under the skin. And then when it's just under the skin in one place, the immune system usually kicks in before the smallpox can spread in the entire body. I say usually, that was like 85%, but 15% it didn't. And I think I've mentioned before that's illustrated in the HBO series on John Adams, where Abigail, they have 5 children, and she decides to variolate her children. And 4 of them come through fine, but one almost dies. So, in keeping with the statistics. But he did that at Valley Forge. So the uh, effective thing is after 5 years of playing cat and mouse, Lafayette, a volunteer from the French aristocracy, plays a key role in courting the French. The French had many geopolitical reasons to join George Washington and the Patriots because they've been fighting wars with the British for a long time, and so this was strategically a smart thing for them to do. But Lafayette helped do that. And so, as I said earlier, Washington really thought it was time to target New York City, but it was probably the French. And Chernow goes into this in quite detail. It was probably the French that talked him out of targeting New York City. There were 10,000 British troops in New York City. But Washington then had the flexibility to turn his initial desire into a fake, into a feint. And so he built fake camps around New York City, had maneuvers within sight of New York City to make the British think, oh, he's going to attack in New York City. And so in the meantime, Lafayette was talking to this French general Rochambeau, and more importantly, starting to coordinate with the French Navy, who were cruising around off the coast and were ultimately supposed to go back to the West Indies, where the French had colonies, as well as the British. And so secretly, Washington was coordinating American and French land and French naval forces. And the interesting thing was Washington had such gravitas that the French General Rochambeau ceded the leadership to Washington. That, again, I think part of his charisma. And so here we go, game on. The Cornwallis had been chased down into Wilmington by Nathaniel Greene, but he decided to break out and head north. And for some reason, he headed to Yorktown. Now, it's interesting, Washington had done war games about Yorktown 3 years before, and could see that Yorktown would never be a place where he'd want any of his troops to go. But seeing that Cornwallis went to Yorktown, he said, well, it's an attractive city, but it's totally indefensible as a military fort, because he'd gone through that logic before. So when he sees that Cornwallis is going to Yorktown, okay, game on, and he tells Rochambeau, and they both go as fast as they can by land down to be ready to strike at Yorktown. And when was a good time to strike? Well, here's the French Navy, and they come into the opening of Chesapeake Bay here. And so effectively, by controlling the waters here, he's preventing the British from supplying Cornwallis for a battle. So Washington, Rochambeau come down. The French Navy closes this off, and the trap is set. So. And how many troops were there? It's interesting. Yes, there were more Americans than there were French, but not by much. Not by much. And Cornwallis, he was outmanned by both armies. So he had really uh, got caught in a trap where America and France could focus all their troops, and the British had no way of resupplying and supporting Cornwallis. So Washington gambled everything by marching from his fake attack in New York to Virginia, 400 miles. And Clinton uh, discovered it was a fake too late. And so uh, Washington was risking his entire field army. He didn't have much more. And fortunately, um, when the British tried to come down from New York City, that's where they were focused. They rushed their ships down, but it was too late. They had to turn around. They had been out of position, and so uh, they fought a battle, but it was 2 hours long, and only took the French 2 hours to sink a large part of the British uh, naval fleet, called the Battle of Chesapeake. Um, and so uh, uh, there's pictures of what it must have uh, looked like. So, uh, uh, you know, luck smiles on the prepared, and so you can say that this was good luck. But and here's what could have gone wrong. The French naval admiral, uh, he could have chosen to fight in New York. Uh, the French general could have resisted Washington. Um, and there's in the Chernow book, there's a very interesting debate on who really wanted to fight in down south and not in New York City. And there's if you read that, it's kind of amusing to see that they both went back and forth on that. But certainly the British leader in New York, he was totally fooled by Washington's fake camps. Um, and the other thing to remember that what the French had that the Americans didn't have was siege artillery, and especially when the ships arrived, they could provide artillery to help in the final conquest of Yorktown. Um, but Washington was ready, and he could move quick. He was, as I said, by dint of his personality, the commander over the French general. He willingly subordinated himself to Washington, and that was remarkable because you were talking about one nation and one wannabe nation, but it was one of the best examples of a successful coalition campaign in history, really. So if you look at the scorecard of Washington's major battles, uh, uh, he won a victory in New York City after almost losing everything at Brooklyn Heights. So there's a victory. But here are a couple of more defeats. Crossing the Delaware, leading to the Battle of Trenton, that was a victory. And then right after that, was the Battle of Princeton. So he had these two remarkable victories back to back after surprising the British by crossing the Delaware on Christmas Eve. So a lot of defeats, some draws, a couple of victories. But here's the big one: Yorktown, decisive victory. And it's amazing he had as many victories as he had, considering his army spread out was usually smaller, less experienced, as we've said, short on supplies, and relying on enlistment volunteers. And he was going up against the world's best professional army, but they were fighting far away from home. So he wins at Yorktown, and they signed the Articles of Capitulation. Cornwallis refused to attend, claiming that he had an illness. Uh, and he may have had malaria. I'll get to that. Um, uh, and when the Brits surrendered, they didn't want to dignify Washington. So they tried to hand their sword to the French general. And he said, nope, the guy over there is who you need to give the sword to. And but out of humility, Washington also refused to take the sword. So finally, his second in command, General Lincoln, took the sword from Cornwallis's deputy. So here's the thing: malaria, for us doctor people, was endemic in eastern Virginia at that time. By the way, malaria was endemic when Junipero Serra reached, or his minions reached the Bay Area. It was particularly heavy out in the Delta area. That was malarial back in Junipero Serra's time. So it was said that half of Cornwallis's army suffered from it. The Continental Army, growing up in this environment, had some resistance. So disease was more destructive of the British Army than it was of the American Army. And the French Army hadn't been there long enough. It apparently takes a month incubation period for you to develop the symptoms of malaria, and the French had just arrived. So that was a disadvantage. This is the Treaty of Paris. So it took 2 years for them to actually sign a treaty. The thing you'll notice here is only the American signatories are depicted. The British refused to pose to be in the picture. So who are these people? John Jay, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and Benjamin Franklin's grandson. Um, uh, Go figure. And so um, the Benjamin Franklin's grandson, by the way, um, uh, uh, immigrated to Paris. He liked it there so much, he became a French citizen. So, what happened in the 2 years between the victory, the final victory at Yorktown, and the signing? The relations began to frazzle. And why was that? The Americans, patriots, said, well, if we're independent of the British, let's not get dependent on France. I think France was expecting good deals when it came to the economy, but they didn't get it. Um, and uh, the urgency that had bound the French and the Patriots together lessened after the fighting. Um, by the way, Britain still occupied New York, Charleston, and Savannah long after Yorktown. So it wasn't a total defeat, and all Brits went home. But they certainly had lost their morale and the idea of enduring any more staged battles like at Yorktown. They'd had enough. They were tired too, and so was Congress. So John Jay, he was later became Secretary of State, and he was pretty sure that France wanted restrictions on our manifest destiny to move to the West. Um, and so France wanted continued Spanish control of the Mississippi. But 20 years later, France had pushed the Spanish away from the Mississippi, and they were the ones, Napoleon, that offered Jefferson the Louisiana Purchase. So uh, the British, surprisingly, offered generous terms to the Patriots. Why would they be generous? Because they wanted, in pure geopolitical terms, to seduce America away from the Brits and to start to work with them just for pure geopolitical reasons. Um, so uh, they were willing to recognize that American patriot control all the way to the Mississippi. And of course, they would try to take that back in the War of 1812. It lasted up to 1815. But that's where Andrew Jackson came in. No, Britain, you gave us control all the way to the Mississippi. You can't change your mind. And we addressed that before. And Britain was even ready to offer favorable debt provisions, and that was fine with Alexander Hamilton, the first director of the Treasury. He was in favor of debt because it would mobilize money that could be used in creating a national economy from de novo. So Americans were ready to do deals with Britain way before the French were. The consequences of this loosening of ties with France, Washington watched all these machinations, and he came to the conclusion, hey, everybody's going to pursue their own interests. The alliances don't mean much. And so when he gave his famous farewell address, he cautioned famously against permanent alliances. Um, and of course, France, who is going to have a revolution of their own in the 1790s, is going to be a part of American politics. Uh, Adams being anti-French,
Oh, it's done.
Jefferson pro-French. Yeah. Um, so uh, the French were a little bit bitter. We helped the Americans and they negotiated behind our backs. And so
Yeah,
I think this is a good place to end. We'll talk about Cincinnatus, another Roman, next week.
that
Uh,
looks good, Anya.
okay. So, all right. Any questions, comments?
Nope.
All right.
How did we pacify the French? I mean, we kind of screwed them, didn't we?
Well, they hardly noticed because they were having a revolution. We got away with it.
So for 2 years, there was a sort of memorandum of understanding between the British and the Americans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Showed it can work. It can work, huh?
Well, it worked. It helps that they speak the same language. They can understand each other. It's probably too much, negotiation with the French.
Hey, John, you might want to add some color here, but Benjamin Franklin was the chief negotiator over in France. Is that correct?
Yes. He always was. He was there at the first Continental Congress, I believe. So he liked France. He liked hobnobbing with French aristocrats and living the good life with French aristocrats. Uh, it's almost comical.
Yeah, and he also liked the French women, right?
That's the point. Yes. Yeah. There've been some novels. Uh, what is that? Israel Potter is one that shows that mocks Benjamin Franklin's lifestyle in Paris. Yeah.
Oh, one other comment. You might want to add some stuff here. John, when General Washington was general, there were, I don't know, maybe we talked about it last time, but there were other generals like him were like sort of backstabbers who wanted to take over General Washington's position. So there were a lot of narcissistic kind of folks back in those days.
Yeah, the main two were Charles Lee, and we talked last week how he uh, got himself in trouble by frequenting a brothel and being captured by British soldiers in the brothel. But Horatio Gates, the guy that won up at Saratoga, a great victory, the rumor was it was actually Benedict Arnold who was the genius of Saratoga, and Horatio Gates didn't report. He didn't let Washington know about the victory even for a couple of months, and so when he Washington was glad that they won at Saratoga, but he was a little bit suspicious that it would give Gates too much power and maybe aid because, things weren't going great. He wasn't piling up victory after victory. So he was always a little edgy that he might be aced out. I don't think it came close to happening, but I think he was suspicious,
Yeah,
and
well, in the documentary, he was trying to talk the a lot of the lieutenant generals into protesting to Congress that they needed money and clothes and all that stuff, and like go to Philadelphia. But then Washington walked in the room and said, let me talk, and then everybody listened to Washington as opposed to Gates. The other guy who had an interesting story was Benedict Arnold. I don't know if everybody knows, but Cornwallis sort of banished Benedict Arnold, and Benedict Arnold
Yes.
ended up going to England to live out the rest of his life.
Yeah, yeah. He he was it was interesting. He
He
was
was.
discovered while Washington was at West Point. And Washington was expecting to have dinner with Benedict Arnold, but a courier carrying incriminating evidence proving smoking gun that Benedict Arnold was communicating with the Brits was captured with that letter, and it was sent to Washington, who couldn't believe it. And he had a dinner planned with Benedict Arnold, and everybody knew the game was up. Washington decided to just pretend and confront Arnold at the dinner. But Benedict Arnold was tipped off that he had been discovered, and he took off without with telling his wife at the last minute, and she had to stay behind to entertain George Washington. And what do you do in that situation? You pretend like you're crazy. So she went into hysterics, and Washington arrived and tried to calm her down. He wasn't aware that she knew that Arnold had been discovered, but she was informed, and that's why she went crazy.
And I guess General George Washington, he asked his men to go and capture Benedict Arnold, but they were never successful in capturing him.
Yeah. Yeah, but you're right. Arnold was welcomed with open arms and given command by the British, but I think they were always a little bit suspicious of his loyalty. Uh, so he never could rise in the British army hierarchy. So he went to Britain. He went and lived the good life in London.
And refresh my memory. At one point, George Washington let Alexander Hamilton lead some battle, and that's how Alexander Hamilton sort of got his claim to fame as a military leader. What battle was that?
That was Yorktown. So that was Yorktown. Hamilton had been angling for a command position on the field. He was getting a little tired of being Washington's scribe. And he said, just let me fight in one battle so I can get my spurs. So he gave him a command at Yorktown to overcome a what's the right word? It was like a little fort out in the edge of the battlefield,
Yeah,
and
didn't he lead the initial charge into Yorktown?
he did. He did. So it was all coordinated, right? And so when the time came, he was given the primary responsibility for capturing the British main outpost out in the field. I forget, there's a name for it. But he did it, and it was one of the first of these little fortifications to fall and it was a domino effect. So it all went very quickly. But Hamilton put himself at risk, but he wanted to have that on his military record.
Yeah, and it's sort of I'm going to have to do a little bit more studying, but it's sort of interesting the relationship between Jefferson and Hamilton.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. All the founding fathers. It's very interesting. And of course, it even between Hamilton and Jefferson, it came down to a philosophy. Jefferson thought that America should become an agrarian paradise, and Hamilton thought we should develop industry. So, you know. It even came close to Rudy's hometown. There in New Jersey, there's that big waterfall. Where is that, Rudy? Uh,
Passaic Falls in Patterson.
Patterson, yeah. Big waterfall, and Hamilton wanted, and in fact, built used the waterfall for power for a big mill in Patterson. Whereas Jefferson, I guess Jefferson would be for that too, because it would aid the farmers. But
So, am I correct in saying that Hamilton was a strong advocate for centralized government, while Jefferson was more into letting the states, uh, each individual state, have more of the say?
yeah, and again, it was also favoring farmers over not industrialists, but over New England was very big on industry, and Jefferson, the southern states, where they conveniently had slaves, which makes agrarian paradises cheaper to run.
Yeah, and I guess that's another reason why they came up with the Senate, because the South, wanted sort of like some guarantees that the Northeast, Boston, and New York wouldn't dominate the Congress.
Yeah, yeah. And that continued as we added more and more rural states. I think, there's some interesting statistics on what percent of the population controls the Senate. If you start with uh, I think it's 20 least populous states, well, that's 40 senators. So uh, that controls a lot of our politics even today.
All right.
All right, guys. See you next week. I hope I've prepared you for the 4th of July, and you can have something to celebrate.
Mhm.
Thanks a lot, John.
All right. Bye bye.